Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about the states that I think are very interesting, wow states, to say the least. I mean, some of these states voted against all expectations for one candidate or, surprised me in the way that they moved from one direction to another or just even more in one direction, and I just wanted to discuss them in this video because I thought that it was important to point out certain states that really defied all expectations and pretty much moved away from the general trends that we've seen throughout this entire election season. So there was a lot of preliminary election data, and I just want to start this out by saying, yes, there were some pretty significant polling inaccuracies. One of these states in particular, Joe Biden was expected to do very well in, and he didn't actually do that well in. I'm not really going to nitpick some of these battleground states in terms of their polling data. While they did accurately predict the winner in, I believe, almost every single state on this map, there were some margin issues, and margins do matter. So overall, we're just going to be discussing probably 3 states in total that really defied all expectations and gave me a sort of a wow reaction when I saw that they were either called or their votes on election day or really election week. So let's go ahead and get through this. I think that it is pretty interesting. So this is the electoral map as it stands today. You can go ahead and find this on, CNN, Fox News, wherever you want to look. But I didn't do it by margins. I didn't feel it was necessary. I didn't really want to focus too much on that. The point is that we're going to be looking at 3 specific states, not so much the overall electoral map. But there are some areas that should really jump out to you. Now, I think the first one, the most obvious wow state that you could probably guess is Georgia. This is a state that really defied all expectations. We saw this battleground state, 16 electoral votes contested by both parties. I mean, Donald Trump won it in 2016, but the Democratic Party said, we can win it this time. The Republican Party said, no, we can hold on to it. Brian Kemp said, this is Trump country. The Democratic Party was saying, this could be Biden country. So Georgia, the Democratic Party spent a lot of time there. Stacey Abrams worked tirelessly. A lot of these organizers, specifically, black canvassers, black organizers, spent a lot of time driving up turnout in this state and across the country. And while almost every minority group really moved away from Joe Biden in comparison to Hillary Clinton, you also have to recognize that black turnout was up. It was higher than it was in 2016, and that was enough to, despite the very marginal shift in favor of Donald Trump amongst the African-American voting bloc, it was enough to do numbers for Joe Biden, enough so that he won the state. And it's not to say that those voters in the Atlanta suburbs, a lot of these white women, white college-educated voters that previously elected Republicans didn't land Joe Biden in the presidency either. It's just a combination of both effects that, 2 groups that typically don't vote either in high amounts or don't vote for the Democratic Party combined, it really helped Joe Biden solidify this state. But if you look at the surrounding red states, besides Virginia, every single state that's considered Southern voted for Donald Trump. So I just wanted to point that out. Georgia defied all expectations nearly 3 decades later, last voting for a Democrat in 1992. Georgia surprised us all after, I think, 4 or 5 days of the votes counted, and it really didn't change much from there. It was projected just a few days later. So that's the first wow state. I think you really could have guessed that. It currently is a margin of, I believe, 0.3% between the 2 candidates. The Democratic Party drove up turnout around the Atlanta area, Atlanta metro, Savannah, very big parts of Georgia that have a lot of Democratic votes. The Democratic Party focused and spent a lot of money here. A lot of people were saying, the Democrats have locked down the Rust Belt. Why aren't they focusing on other states? Why are they really focusing on Georgia when Florida and North Carolina could be the prize? Now, not to say the Biden campaign didn't spend time there, but it's to point out that Georgia was supposed to be this state that was completely out of reach for Democrats, and North Carolina and Florida were not. So those were some surprises. Now, I'm not too shocked at North Carolina. I wouldn't say that's one of the wow states for me. Yes, Georgia did vote to the left of North Carolina, but at the end of the day, North Carolina has always had a very weird history. They've always been pro-Democrat sometimes in preliminary election data, and then on election day, they skew heavily to the right. And I mean that very literally. Let's go ahead and take a look at the North Carolina election data. They predicted a Joe Biden victory in the state, not by much, by 1.8%. But Joe Biden in this state was expected to get 48.9% of the vote. He actually got 48.6%. So he only lost a very small amount, but a lot of those undecideds, the overwhelming majority of them split for Donald Trump. They overwhelmingly moved over into the Trump column. So I don't really understand, the weird dynamic in North Carolina in its entirety. There's this subset of voters that doesn't like to answer these election polls, or really doesn't like to tell the pollsters who they're voting for, say they're undecided, and then pretty much split for Donald Trump overwhelmingly. Joe Biden didn't change much. He was off by 0.3 in the polling results, but Donald Trump was off by nearly 3 points. So there was a pretty significant shift, enough so that Joe Biden lost the state of North Carolina and Donald Trump was able to win it. So North Carolina, this state, I wouldn't say is too surprising. I expected it to be within a certain point. I said it was a tilt state. It could have gone either way. I rated it as a Democratic victory. I was wrong about that. I own up to that. But I wouldn't say it's one of those states that was really surprising to me. I don't think so. So the next state, well, what's important? Well, let's take a look at the electoral map. Another state surrounding Georgia. This is my next wow state. If it's not North Carolina and it's not Alabama, it's either South Carolina or Florida, and I'm pretty sure you can guess that it is the state of Florida. Now, I know it seems a little bit weird. I'm choosing two states from the South when there's so many other parts that may have surprised you personally, but I wasn't too shocked by the performance of Joe Biden in the Sun Belt. I mean, Florida, I think, accurately represents the loss of Latino support for Joe Biden across the Sun Belt region, but I didn't feel it was necessary to characterize Nevada, characterize Arizona. While those states may have been a little surprising, Florida was definitely the most shocking out of them all. So let's go and take a look at the Florida election results. Donald Trump did win the state, and he won it by an even larger margin than 2016. He won it by nearly double the amount, and when we're looking at the overall results, we have to ask ourselves, why did this happen? How did Donald Trump somehow win more votes in Florida despite losing votes in literally every other swing state except for maybe Nevada? And Nevada ended up going to Joe Biden. Well, it had to do with these specific counties. Miami-Dade County, which gave Hillary Clinton roughly a 30-point margin to victory. Joe Biden only won it by single digits. In a bunch of these regions, actually, Joe Biden did better amongst the most populous counties. He actually won more votes than Hillary Clinton, with a few exceptions. But his loss, his inability to appeal to a lot of these Latino voters that, he laughed off the comment of him being branded as a socialist. Now, that may have seemed at the time like, why would you consider Joe Biden a socialist? He even said in his own words that he, quote, beat the socialist, referring to Senator Bernie Sanders. On top of that, Joe Biden, by many metrics, is a centrist. The right wing painted Joe Biden as this socialist, extremely left candidate. Can you imagine what they would have said about the Vermont senator? I mean, it's kind of comical, really, looking at the messaging used by the right when there was Joe Biden, who, sure, maybe one of the most progressive candidates in history based off current policy, I guess you could say relative to the time period, with the exception of maybe FDR. But looking at Joe Biden as a candidate, he stood for a lot of things that Hillary Clinton did not. Bernie Sanders, however, stood for a lot of things Joe Biden did not for a lot longer period of time. And I think it's just interesting that the Democratic Party, first of all, they really liked Joe Biden because it was a centrist and they thought that he would be immune to these attacks, but obviously not. Obviously not. And Donald Trump used this rhetoric, and it was very interesting to me that this rhetoric was used against someone who a lot of Democrats, a lot of left-wing Democrats really thought that Joe Biden was the furthest right they would go. And for the Trump campaign, that was the furthest left they would go. So it's kind of a weird situation, but Florida really resonated well with this socialist movement, moment. They really couldn't brandish Hillary Clinton as that, but Joe Biden sort of backed away from the entirety of the moderate appeal up until the election season. Hillary Clinton did dabble back and forth, but by no means was her campaign as far to the left as Joe Biden's. But when we're looking at Florida, it wasn't just there. It was also in Arizona. It was also in Nevada. It was also in Texas. Now, Texas is a state that a lot of Democrats are targeting in the future. It is absolutely winnable. Not saying it isn't. Donald Trump, he lost 3% of voters from 2016 to 2020. In 2012, Romney won it by 17 points. Trump won it by 9 4 years later. So this state is moving closer to the Democratic Party, but the lack of significant Latino support was what really hindered Joe Biden in this state. Not saying that he would have won this state with it, but it would have been a heck of a lot closer. So Texas didn't really shock me. Florida, I think, perfectly represents a lot of what we saw in terms of the shift in Hispanic support from the Democrats to the Republicans in this election season. So Florida is my next state. So Florida, Georgia. What is the final state? I said there would be 3 states. I said it wouldn't be from the Sun Belt. Well, we're going to pick a state from the Rust Belt. It is not Michigan. It is not Ohio. Though Ohio could be, but also I expected it to go red. Just because it broke a 60-year streak doesn't mean it's a wow state. I think that we expected Ohio to go red, but it was very unfortunate for their streak. Same thing in Vigo County, Indiana. Is it Iowa? No, it's not Minnesota. So it's the state of Wisconsin. This is a state that threw me for a loop, first of all. I mean, Wisconsin was the most Republican state out of the three in 2016. It holds that record today. Michigan right now has Biden up by nearly 3 points. Pennsylvania has Biden up by just a little bit over a percentage point. But Wisconsin is a 0.6% margin. A 0.6% margin. It's actually closer than where it was back in 2016. Donald Trump won it by 22,000 votes. Joe Biden wins it by 20,000 votes. So an extremely close state. But did anyone see this coming? I mean, Pennsylvania, I expected to be close. I put Pennsylvania in the lean column for a reason. Michigan was closer than I expected, but it wasn't shocking given that Joe Biden won the state by nearly 3 points. But Wisconsin was significantly inaccurate based off what the election data was telling us. They told us that Biden would win 52% of the vote in Wisconsin. He won it with 49%. They were telling us that Donald Trump would win 44% of the vote. He won 49% of the vote. I'm rounding down for Biden, rounding up for Trump. It's still less than a percentage. Roughly half a point separates the two. This state should not have been this close. This battleground state should not have been within a percentage point based off the preliminary election data, based off the 2018 midterm election data, really based off the 2016 election data. Minnesota moved 5 points to the left. Colorado, New Mexico moved 5 points to the left. Virginia moved 5 points to the left. Georgia moved 6 points to the left. New Hampshire moved 5 points to the left. Maine moved 5 points to the left. All of these states moved to the left. Even Ohio and Iowa voted more to the left in 2020 than they did in 2016. But Wisconsin wasn't super significant. This was a huge swing from the preliminary election data. This was a huge swing. An 8.4% expected margin of victory for Biden, down to less than a percentage point. This reminds us of the 2016 election polls. Not a single poll had Trump ahead in Wisconsin. Clinton was up 6.5% on the average. Trump won it by less than a percentage point. That was a big swing. This is just as large of a swing. In fact, just slightly more. And they've had 4 years to correct themselves. They had a pretty okay track record in 2018. So really, what went wrong in Wisconsin? This state was supposed to be a state where Joe Biden was solidifying the blue wall. And while he did win the state, the fact it wasn't larger than Trump's victory in 2016, the fact that this state had swung to Donald Trump by nearly 8 points has got to sting, has got to tell the polling industry that they did something wrong, not only in Wisconsin, but in neighboring Michigan and neighboring Pennsylvania. They didn't get Minnesota wrong, so they're doing something there correctly. They didn't get Nebraska second wrong, so they're doing something there correctly. They got Iowa and Ohio a little bit off. They predicted the correct winners, yes, but the margins were off. The margins in Michigan were off by roughly 4 or 5 points. Pennsylvania was off by roughly 3-4 points. So I'm okay, I guess, with some of those numbers. It's sort of a reminiscent 2016 swing that's still there, but Wisconsin was a little bit more than 2016, and it's overall an embarrassment to the polling industry. Not only is it an embarrassment to the polling industry, but also it's just very surprising. I mean, this was a state that really shocked me. Pennsylvania, I thought that it would be close. It was the closest state in the Rust Belt, at least by my prediction. That ended up not being true. Michigan wasn't too surprising that it ended up going blue by roughly 3 points. I thought it would go blue by 5-6%. Well, it ended up going blue by 3 points. The entire country underperformed for Democrats, whether it was on down ballot races or on the presidential race. So it's not too shocking to see that Michigan swung by 3 points to Donald Trump. But Wisconsin swung by 8 points to Donald Trump. That's a huge swing. That is a huge swing. So Wisconsin was a shocker. Georgia was absolutely a shocker. And Florida, with its very early election results, were giving people a lot of anxiety very quickly, very early in the night. They counted a lot of their ballots before Election Day, and it was enough so that people were thinking that the election would be wrapped up for Trump that evening because there was a red mirage, and Florida voting to the right of the country and voting to the right of where it was in 2016, despite the overwhelming majority of the other states doing the exact opposite, gave a lot of us the impression that Donald Trump was on his pathway to being reelected. But we all know that is no longer the case. So Joe Biden won the election, but huge surprises in Georgia, huge surprises in Florida, and huge surprises in Wisconsin. Keep an eye out on those states in the future elections. For some reason, the Rust Belt is just horribly mispolled. Georgia was actually spot on. Florida was slightly off. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.